Hi, I'm Angela Nicholson, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to sharpen images. In Photoshop, all the sharpening tools are filters, so we go to Filter and down to Sharpen. There are several options, but the most useful are Smart Sharpen and Unsharp Mask, and I'm going to start with Unsharp Mask. As you can see, the Unsharp Mask palette has a preview screen where we can see how much sharpening is being applied. The amount slider governs the level of sharpening that's applied. So pushing it up increases the amount of sharpening. The radius slider dictates the area around the edge, or the size of the area that is sharpened. So pushing it up increases the sharpening, but as you can see, as the level gets higher, halos develop. So if you find you're getting halos in your images, it's worth looking to see what level radius you're using. Generally, you want to keep the radius below about 3. I often find a figure below 1 is sufficient. Threshold limits the sharpening. Using a high value would only apply sharpening to high contrast areas, where a low value applies it more generally across the image and allows low contrast and fine details to be sharpened. Again, you usually want to keep a fairly low value. I'm just tweaking the image. I think we're not far off getting the right value here. Just take the threshold down a little, I think. Okay, it's useful to move the palette to one side and click the preview on and off. You don't really want to see a dramatic difference. And as you pan around the preview image, holding the cursor down or left clicking on the mouse hides the filter. I think we're about there, so all I have to do now is select OK, and that's the image sharpened. Applying Unsharp Mask can result in artifacts and colour shifts in your image, but we can avoid this by just applying the sharpening to the luminance channel. The easiest way to do this, that has the least impact or detrimental impact on image quality, is to use the merge option. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate the layer. I'm going to call that Sharp, and then use Unsharp Mask. So we'll just apply this at what appears to be the right level. Let's zoom in on a bit of detail. Just keep adjusting the figures. Right, let's call a halt there. Okay, so that's the sharpening applied. Now I just go to the layer merging option and I just scroll down to luminosity, and that applies the sharpening just to the luminance channel. Adobe Camera Raw has some very sophisticated sharpening tools which can be applied to RAW files, but also JPEGs if you choose to open them in Camera Raw. The first step is to zoom into the image to 100% so you can see how much sharpening you're applying. And now I'm going to use the Details tab. If I just hold the Shift bar down, I can scroll around the image. Now obviously a key area for sharpening with this portrait is the eyes, but I don't want to over sharpen the skin. So I'm going to start by using these sliders here. Now amount is pretty much the same as in USM. So you can see I'm pushing it very high there, and we're getting quite a bit of texture coming into the image. And take the radius down. Just keep adjusting the figures. And then we have the detail. It's similar to threshold in that it's used to control haloing and determine how much emphasis is given to edges, but its impact decreases as you increase the number. So a high number will mean that there's more sharpening applied, and a low number will mean there's less sharpening. Now we're going to look at the Smart Sharpen tool. So we go up to Filter, down to Sharpen, and then Smart Sharpen. Now the clever thing here is that we can dictate what sort of blur we're going to remove. Now Gaussian blur is this sort of general blur that actually Unsharp Mask normally tackles, or we can use lens blur, which is very useful for correcting the problems resulting from using an optical system. Or there's movement blur, which corrects slight movement. On the whole, I think you should probably correct that by taking the image again using a faster shutter speed, but nevertheless you can go some way to correcting motion blur using it. I'm going to use lens blur with this image because it's very good with fine detail. Then all we need to do is adjust the amount and the radius as we did before in a very, very similar way to with unsharp mask. We can push it up quite high with this image. You see, just panning around as I hold the mouse button down, you see the pre-sharpened image. When I release, you see the sharpened version. Now another clever feature of this tool is that if we select the advanced options, we can actually adjust the amount of sharpening that's applied to the shadows and the highlights. So we can fade how much is applied. So if I increase the fade here, you'll see it's quite hard to make out, but there were some artifacts in that shadow area there, and they've pretty much disappeared by me increasing the fade amount of the shadows. You can also adjust the radius if you want, and the tonal width dictates what proportion of the shadows are going to be affected. Similarly, you can work on the highlights, but that doesn't really have much impact on this image. It probably would work very well with a landscape with bright white clouds. So there we have it, Smart Sharpen.